chances are your company's marketing efforts could be producing better results. We're here to help make your marketing smarter. Welcome to Marketing Cupcakes, bringing you the latest in marketing analytics, data science techniques, integration challenges, guerrilla marketing techniques, and more. Here are your hosts of Marketing Cupcakes, Dave and James Gilbert.
Welcome to another episode of Marketing Cupcakes. I'm your host, Dave Gilbert. Today we're going to be talking about how to create a unified process and mutual appreciation between sales and marketing. And to kick off the conversation, we've invited one of HubSpot's best, Brian Signorelli. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
So, Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, what it is that you do at HubSpot, and then we'll get into some of the questions that we have about this topic.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. So I've been at HubSpot since May 2012. Before that, I was actually a HubSpot customer for just over a year or so. So that's when I kind of got first exposed to HubSpot software, inbound marketing, how the technology works, people that are here. So I personally enjoyed it so much, decided to throw my hat in the ring and apply to work here. And turns out they were kind enough to give me a job at the time. So started as a sales rep on our agency partner team in 2012. Did that for just over 2 years. Transitioned into running a sales team of about 10 or 11 reps for just over 2 years. And then recently, back in October, I took over responsibility to start building out the company's sales partner channel, which works with CRM implementers, CRM consultants, sales coaches, and trainers to help them grow their business by offering services wrapped around our sales products.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're really uniquely positioned for the topic today because you are part of HubSpot. And I'm sure most of the people listening to the podcast are familiar with HubSpot and the inbound methodology and a little bit about who they are. You know, they're one of the big players in marketing automation and just have grown into just this fully robust system to just get more business, you know. So one of the first questions that we wanted to jump into with you, Brian, is what is the most common challenge that you see with marketing enabling sales to do their jobs? What have you seen in your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think obviously there's the tale of two cities, sales being city one and marketing being city two. So I'll start from the salesperson's perspective, and then I'll vindicate any marketers who might be laughing as I go through my description of the problems that sales sees from the marketing side. So, you know, from the salesperson's perspective, I think the most common challenge is that, you know, marketing either isn't responsible for generating leads, like salespeople just don't understand what marketers are doing, or if a marketing team is generating leads, we often have this tendency of pushing back on the quality of those leads. And one interesting little fact is that HubSpot did a little bit of research earlier this year, did a survey which can be found in what's called a State of Inbound 2016. And one of the questions we asked was basically, it was to ask sales reps to rate the quality of the leads they get from marketing. And it turns out that only 5% of all the leads that they get from marketing are rated as very high quality. So basically when you looked at, you know, three big buckets across, you know, leads they get from marketing, leads they source themselves, and I think referrals was the last category. You know, far and away, leads they source themselves are considered much higher quality, and referrals are considered much higher quality. So I think that's, you know, evidence that most salespeople question, I think at best, the quality of leads coming in. And then I think, you know, a little bit more granularly when it comes to content creation, the content that marketing's producing, sales reps they just don't always know which pieces of content marketing's creating. And as a result of that, another great statistic that came out of research from DocuRated, I think it was their State of Sales Enablement or Sales Effectiveness 2016 report, that stated that, you know, less than 10% of all the content that marketing produces gets used. And specifically, I believe that was referencing that less than 10% of all the marketing content that's produced gets used at least 5 times or more by a sales team. So it's not like it never gets used by any means. I don't think it's like less than 10% of all the content gets used, but it's up to that kind of, you know, repeat value that someone's getting out of it. So I think to boil it down, Sales side, it's really either not understanding what marketing is doing, not understanding how the content they're creating is helping them close deals, or the third is really just questioning the quality of the leads that marketing is generating in the first place. Then on the marketer side, I think the challenges from sales reps is kind of the classic stuff is that sales reps just have bad raps. Like I think that a lot of marketers probably perceive salespeople as being pushy, thoughtless, ruthless, money hungry, or stuck in their ways, or legacy reps, and that they'll do anything it takes to make their number just to get paid. So I think it's just kind of, it's certainly a misunderstanding of, both, I think of both sides of the equation. But yeah, that's my maybe not so short take on it.
Well, and I think what you're alluding to is kind of a key piece, and that's unifying the customer journey, right? I mean, having that seamless experience for the customer from the first touch point all the way down to when they become a customer, right? Or should I say prospect? And so, I mean, how are you seeing that marketing and sales are being successful? I mean, what are the common challenges that they face with integrating that customer journey all the way down?
Yeah, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. I mean, one of the most common challenges that I've seen in marketing and sales just collaborating or working better with one another is that they fail to have a common understanding or a shared understanding of who they're actually selling to. So, if you're a business leader, one interesting exercise I'd recommend, and I think I got this, this idea from another podcast I was listening to or some article. I can't remember exactly where it was from, but I think it is interesting. So, if you're a business leader, walk the halls and start asking some people on the sales floor, on your marketing team, and ask them first, who do we sell to? And then second, ask them, okay, based on who you think we sell to, how do you think we help them? And I wouldn't be surprised at all, especially if you're a company, I'd say even with as few as 20 employees, that you're going to get a wide variety of answers. And the way I think about this is kind of like value proposition scope creep. It's the same idea of, if you're playing a game of telephone, the original message gets so watered down over time as a company grows and expands, and as companies pivot and shift, who they're selling to and how their maybe products or services are changing over time. And that's just a reality of being in business and in growing as a company. So, unless you have an incredibly tight or buttoned up training and onboarding process for every single new hire that joins the company, that value prop and that understanding of who you sell to is going to get obfuscated over time. But, if you're going back and trying to improve that alignment across sales and marketing, you really have to go back and start with really getting common buy-in and agreement on who the company actually sells to and how you help them solve their problems, achieve their goals, overcome their challenges, etc.
It's funny. I was thinking about that actually this morning. I was reading up a little bit on HubSpot's growth-driven design that we're going to be offering as well. And one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is how much was taken from the lean startup, the lean methodology that a lot of tech companies use to drive their growth, and how that iterative process is really so inclusive into anything that you're doing in your business. And that's the same thing that's happening with sales and marketing. And I was thinking about how one of the companies that I helped build was that exact problem of this is where we were at this point in time when we sold to these customers. And as you bring on more and more employees, that definition kind of gets diluted and gets, evolves, and people start taking on their own definitions and their own perceptions of the customers and how you help them. And so you get this diluted message that isn't really unified for the customer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a tough thing to overcome. Again, it just as a company grows, as customers even bring new challenges, as company goes through different kind of ebbs and flows or cycles or kind of moves up through the growth curve. Sales reps, even though I've been in sales and I've been a sales rep, like I wouldn't say I'm trashing my own kind, so to speak, but we often seek the path of least resistance. And so if we find a value prop that is simpler to sell or, some feature that is easier to get a deal done, like we might latch onto that and then all of a sudden, it's like a runaway train. if one sales rep finds something that works, every other sales rep is going to use that, right? And that's one way that you could, sometimes that gets out of control pretty quickly. I think it's, if anyone out there, who's listening to this is saying, oh God, we have such a watered down value prop. It feels like an overwhelming problem solved, but I can tell you, you're definitely not alone. It's a very common problem, and there are some relatively simple things you can do to fix it, or at least start to reduce the inflammation, so to speak.
Yep.
So Brian, I've been at a few enterprise companies myself where we've gone through, sales and marketing alignment workshops. And one of the biggest challenges that I've ran into is being able to change the culture between the two departments so that they're kind of telling one story and singing one song. Can you talk a little bit about what are some ways in which companies can change the culture between the two departments and create more synergy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not easy. It's a pretty loaded question, right? But I think it starts with some simple exercise. It kind of gets back to what I was talking about earlier about making sure that the two teams have a common understanding of who the company sells to, and how you solve those problems. And there's probably, especially if there's any enterprise level, executives or managers or team members out there listening to this podcast, you might say, that's a pipe dream because we have so many different, product lines or services, so on and so forth. I say, hey, you know what? That's perfectly fine. The reality is you're just running multiple kind of small lines of business, or maybe not so small lines of business. Either way, they're lines of business inside of the larger enterprise, right? And even within those lines of business, you may sell to multiple people. You may have different solutions. You may have different value props. But I'd also be willing to bet that budget and time is somewhat limited. And so you have to prioritize which one you're going to go after first, second, third, and fourth, right? So the bottom line is that, you first have to get that common understanding and agreement on who the company sells to. There may be multiple people. That's perfectly fine. Multiple types of people, types of industries, geographic regions, so on. So that's perfectly fine. Just prioritize them. Right? And then the second is making sure for each kind of, we would call that a buyer profile at HubSpot. And for each buyer profile, you want to make sure that you have a clear value proposition for each buyer persona that you're selling into at those companies. So the buyer persona, the people at those companies you're selling into, or the buyer profile is the type of company you're selling into, at least for anybody in the B2B world. And then, the third and fourth things, these aren't really like trust building exercises by any means. They're more tactical exercises that, depending on your company and, how well the teams get along in the first place, it may or may not be easy to do. The third thing I recommend, on top of getting that common agreement on who you're selling to and the value prop for the people you're selling to at those companies, the third thing is really making sure that you're uniting the sales and marketing teams together through revenue goals. On the sales side of the house, that goal is obviously the sales rep's quota, the director's quota, the head of sales quota, so on and so forth. And on the marketing side of the house, it's typically how many marketing or sales qualified or sales accepted leads the marketing team is generating for the sales team to call on and work and close new business against each month. Again, this is for, of course, more B2B oriented companies. And then last, I'd point out is just making sure that both the sales and marketing teams understand the types of content that needs to be created and used at different stages of the buyer's journey. So obviously when someone's in the awareness phase of doing research, the types of content they're looking for are going to be very different from the content that they're looking at in the consideration or decision phase of a buyer's journey. And I know it sounds so simple, but I feel like simple principles like that, or kind of the concept of getting back to basics, often gets lost. And so I think that just taking the time to map out your existing content, understand how it ties back to the three general phases across awareness, consideration, decision in a buyer's journey, making sure both the sales and marketing team understands that mapping process. I think those are worthwhile exercises, and also gives a bit of guidance or create some clarity on where the marketing team is weak, where the sales team is weak, so on and so forth.
That is awesome feedback. From your experience, is there any type of technology that helps make these processes a little bit smoother when it comes to the transition between the two departments?
Yeah, the way I thought about this, so I mean, I think that there are processes and there's technology, right? Of course, I'm biased. I work for HubSpot. I'd say that HubSpot's technology can certainly help this. It's a shameless plug, obviously, but I'm going to elaborate on plenty more than that. But I'll actually start with process, if that's okay with you guys. So, I think in terms of the process that can make this transition a bit smoother, I think it's certainly important for a business leader to create an environment in which sales and marketing team members or leaders can at least express their opinion on what the ideal buyer profile and ideal buyer persona look like. And again, just in case anyone missed earlier, the way we think about the buyer profile is it's the ideal type of company that your business sells to, whereas the buyer persona is the person or the people within that ideal company that that are actually making purchasing decisions. For anybody in the B2C world, by the way, you would skip kind of past the buyer profile because you're not selling to a business, you're selling to people, so buyer personas are relevant, whereas the profiles aren't. And then I also think, too, and again, and this is in terms of process, I truly believe that B2B companies should have a service level agreement in place between sales and marketing teams. And specifically that service level agreement, or that SLA, should define how many MQLs or SQLs, sales qualified leads, the marketing team's going to generate each month to help the sales team get to their goals. And on top of that, it's also going to pay a dividend insofar as that it's enabling marketing to attribute themselves back to close one revenue. And then on the sales side of the service level agreement, this is the sales team's commitment to work the leads that are passed to them and to work them a certain number of times before giving up on those leads. The average sales rep makes, I think, 1 or 1.5 attempts. Like 40% of sales rep makes like 1 or 2 attempts before giving up, but 80% of all deals are closed, with 5 or more touches to any leads. For anyone on the sales or the marketing side, for that matter, that's putting some of this tracking in place, or putting these service level agreements in place, I would absolutely recommend tracking the speed of response. The leads are contacted by the sales team. Again, it's important to track that because if you've read the lead response management, I think it's Lead Response Management Institute put out a study that said that leads that are contacted within 5 minutes have a 20x chance of being connected with, and those that take more than 5 minutes. And then I think the last thing too is important to set up, and this is something that we've been doing at HubSpot for about a year or two. So I think we're actually kind of late to the game considering we've been in business for 10 years and have almost 300 sales reps. I think that sales needs a way to disposition leads and send them back to the marketing team with a clear reason as to why they're being sent back. So, for example, sometimes leads that come in are not real leads, like they have bad contact data. Maybe they're outside of a territory, or maybe they converted on a form on a website that looked like a MQL or SQL conversion, but in fact it wasn't. For whatever reason, you just need a way to have that free-flowing stream of communication back and forth between sales and marketing, so that sales is sending leads back to marketing. Marketing understands why, and it's not just marketing looking at that and saying, well, what the hell? Like, sales didn't even work this. They don't understand who we're selling to. Like, kind of opens up that Pandora's box again on the lack of understanding across two organizations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things
I'll pause there for a second before we get into technology, but I'm happy to elaborate on that as well if we have some time left on the podcast today.
Yeah, we've got some time, Brian. So if you want to elaborate on the technology, we'd be glad to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Sure. Yeah. So a few thoughts on technology. And again, this is coming back to smoothing the way in which the sales and marketing teams are working together. So when I think of that, I think about a handful of activities. There's 3 kind of major categories that I think of. So the first is that your team, the sales and marketing teams, are going to need a way to manage the contact database. This is really obvious, but you need to be able to understand the marketing work that goes into the contact database, as well as the sales work that happens against the contact database. The contact database is the common backbone that unites sales and marketing. And if sales and marketing don't have shared visibility into exactly what that contact database looks like, and the sales and marketing work that goes into it, it's going to be really, really difficult for the two teams to work together or stay in sync. Of course, the tools to manage the contact database, manage the marketing work, manage the sales work, those are your CRMs and your marketing automation platforms. The second is, as far as the marketing team goes, they need a way to share and disseminate the content that they create to the sales team in such a way that the sales team understands how to use that content at different stages of the buyer's journey that we talked about earlier. Some tools for this, for the marketing team, obviously, if you're not using your website as a sales rep or as a content engine, you absolutely should. That's an obvious one. The second that I've seen, obviously, is like an internal wiki to basically share, any documents, competitive intelligence, battle cards, things like that. And then the third area is, or the third set of tools would be simple file sharing tools, things like Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, and just making sure that, whatever it is. I think even as I was listing this out, I just listed off 5 different ways, for the marketing team to disseminate information. What I would try to do is limit yourself to 2, maybe 3 sources at most, because the more sources you create, the more confusing it is, the more difficult it is to find the right piece of content, keep it up to date, etc. And then I think the last thing is the sales team is going to need a they're going to need basically insight into which pieces of content are working well and which ones aren't. So in terms of tracking and analyzing documents, there's a handful of tools out there. The Hubspot has some sales tools. There's actually an app inside that tool called Documents that allows you to track who's opening or clicking on any links in any emails you send. Some other tools I've seen, though, that have been great for this are tools like Guru and Docurated is another one. And then in terms of feedback and giving the sales team a way to provide feedback back to the marketing team on the quality and effectiveness of the content they're using, keep it really, really simple. I think things like, creating a Slack channel. I mean, Slack obviously has a free product, you get paid products, or something as simple as a Google form, or even, getting really back to basics, something like, a centralized, email inbox, like, marketing feedback at companyname.com or something. It sounds silly, but, at least the place for reps to give that feedback. So yeah, I think, the big ones are definitely marketing automation tools, CRMs, tools like Box, Dropbox file sharing apps, and then really just a mechanism like Slack or Google Forms or anything along those lines just to facilitate feedback back and forth or provide that loop from sales back to marketing. Wow,
Brian, there's a lot of good information here. Really, really thank you for being on here and talking about this, because I think it's an ongoing problem that bigger, as companies grow, it's really a struggle. And so having all this information is just a goldmine for people that are struggling with this right now. So thanks again.
I'm happy to share, and thanks for inviting me on again today, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go, Brian, do you want to give HubSpot a little plug and how they can find you at HubSpot if anybody wants to listening?
Sure, it's very kind of you. I'd be happy to. So anyone listening there today or on the podcast, they're listening to the podcast today, HubSpot's a software company based in Cambridge, Mass. We have over 20,000 customers across 70 countries all over the world. We have headquarters here in Boston, international headquarters in Dublin and Sydney, and also in Tokyo and Singapore. We've been in business for about 10 years. We service primarily small and mid-sized businesses that are looking to basically grow their business faster through inbound marketing, which is a systematic and predictable way to generate traffic, leads, and sales through your website. And HubSpot makes that possible through our education, our training, our technology, and we have technology or software platforms both on the marketing side of the house as well as the sales side of the house. So we can certainly help with sales and marketing line from a technology perspective. Again, thanks for allowing me to do a quick little plug there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Brian. Thanks so much for being on.
All right, thanks, guys.
We'll see you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Marketing Cupcakes, an Endure podcast with your hosts, Dave and James Gilbert. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit marketingcupcakes.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate the podcast. We'll catch you next time on Marketing Cupcakes.